Live from Washington, this is BBC News. 5 Thai hostages freed from Gaza return home to Bangkok more than a week after they were released by Hamas. After almost 500 days in captivity in Gaza, 3 more Israeli hostages are released. The concerns are being raised about their well-being, with families describing shock at their appearance. And scenes of celebration in the West Bank after Israel released 183 Palestinian prisoners in exchange, but officials say they too were in need of medical care. I'm Helena Humphrey. Good to have you with us. We begin with some breaking news from Thailand, where 5 hostages released by Hamas last week just returned home. Moments ago, the 5 men received a warm welcome at the airport in Bangkok, met by their families after more than 500 days in captivity. The Thai nationals were kidnapped during the Hamas attack on Israel on October the 7th, 2023. They'd been working on farms in southern Israel. They'd been in an Israeli hospital for medical treatment following their release. We can go live now to our Southeast Asia correspondent, Jonathan Head, who is in Bangkok. Jonathan, very good to have you with us. You are there at the airport where those 5 Thai hostages have just arrived. Just describe to us the scenes, how their families were reacting.
They just came through a few minutes ago, just out through this gate. They're now actually speaking over to the left with the Thai Foreign Minister, other Thai officials. They're not saying very much about their. They're not saying very much about their ordeal. Obviously they spent an awful lot of time in captivity, and the Thais are making clear they're not going to be able to talk a lot. But they are with some of their families now. Some of the families flew to meet them in Israel, but there are other family members of some of these 5 Thai farm workers who have not seen them in some cases for several years. So there were pretty emotional scenes on the stage when they met them just a few minutes ago. Very tearful as they were brought back. They are in surprisingly good health. Now, you referred there to the state of some of the Israeli hostages. These Thai men have spent the last 10 days in an Israeli hospital being checked. But from what we can see, they are in pretty good health. Their state of mind, of course, is something that might be much harder to assess. So from here, they will be taken straight back to their families, their communities in the north and northeast. And will then obviously go through quite a process of readjustment being back here.
And Jonathan, we understand that there is still 1 Thai national being held. What do we know about efforts to secure their release?
Well, there's not much they can do. I mean, you have to remember with even these 5 hostages, there had been no information about them at all over the last year. In fact, Thai Foreign Ministry officials said to me they had no idea they were alive until that agreement between Israel and Hamas last month. And they were quite surprised when the discussion about hostage releases started, when they were told actually there were 5 Thais who would be released. It was the first they knew about it. They have no information about the last man. He's from Nakhon Phanom in the very far northeast. I mean, we in the past have spoken to his wife. I mean, we spoke to her, it was very soon after the Hamas attack. So she's been holding out hope that he's still alive, but there has been literally no information about him since his abduction. So at this stage, they've got no idea whether he's alive, and they're not getting any information either. They've simply got to wait for Hamas or any other group to find him and say what, or to tell them what actually happened to him.
And so, Jonathan, how did so many Thai nationals end up being caught up in the events of October the 7th?
Well, there are thousands of Thais who go every year to Israel to work on farms there. This is something that goes back several decades, and they've become a very important part of Israel's agricultural economy. And many of those farms, of course, were in kibbutzes close to the border with Gaza. There were many Thais working in the kibbutzes that were caught up and took the full brunt of the Hamas attacks on the 7th of October. Now, we don't know whether there was any deliberate decision to take them or not, or what Hamas's view of the Thais is. I mean, Thailand is not a party to the conflict, but they just got caught up in those early attacks. 40 Thais, around 40, were killed in those first attacks, and 2 of the hostages who were taken have died in captivity. And the others were kept initially in pretty grim conditions. We spoke to some who got out after just more than 50 days, and their ordeal was very, very harsh. We don't know yet what the experience of these 5 men has been over a much longer period of time. But looking at them today, it appears they, at least certainly in the later stages, they appear to have been treated reasonably humanely.
Our Southeast Asia correspondent Jonathan Head there at the airport in Bangkok, where those 5 Thai nationals have just returned after almost 16 months in captivity. Jonathan, good to talk to you. Well, Israel and Hamas follow through with their 5th hostage and prisoner exchange on Saturday since the ceasefire agreement went into effect some 3 weeks ago. Israel's Prime Minister expressed shock at the condition of the 3 hostages that were released by Hamas. Eli Sharabi, Ohad Ben Ami and Or Levy all appeared to be gaunt, frail and weak. Now, they were freed in exchange for the release by Israel of 183 Palestinian prisoners, 7 of whom had to be taken to hospital, according to the Palestinian Red Crescent. Israel says that it's sending a delegation to Doha for the next phase of the ceasefire talks. And our correspondent Weira Davis reports now.
For the families of the 3 hostages held for 490 days in Gaza, this day was the one they'd been waiting for. Amid a show of force from Hamas fighters, as the minibus carrying Eli Sharabi, Ohad Ben Ami and Or Levy arrived at the handover point, watching from their Tel Aviv home, Eli Sharabi's family couldn't contain their excitement. But as the 3 emerged looking gaunt and weak, shadows of their former selves, celebration turned to shock.
It's mixed feelings. I'm happy to see him standing on 2 feet, but he looks sad, he looks thin, he looks bad.
At Tel Aviv's Hostages Square, the sight of what the men had been reduced to hit home. After seeing the conditions of the hostages released today, there's a renewed sense of urgency here to secure the release of all the captives from Gaza as quickly as possible. And that means an extension of the ceasefire, something that is by no means guaranteed. More than 180 Palestinians were simultaneously released today under the ceasefire agreement. 70 had been convicted of serious crimes and were serving long sentences. But the majority were Gazans, detained during the war and held without charge. The Palestinian Red Crescent said 7 of those released were admitted to hospitals in the West Bank and Gaza after accusations they'd been brutally treated in Israeli jails. This prisoner said he was beaten on his hands and his legs, even as he was being transferred from jail. Some, including Tabet al-Haddad, were taken to Gaza's European hospital. I've got many problems from the beating and the torture all over my body, he says. All of the prisoners suffered from hunger, beating and humiliation, even scabies. There have been many tragic stories on both sides of this conflict. For the hostages released today, the physical trauma of 15 months in captivity was obvious. The psychological impact impossible to quantify. Weira Davis, BBC News.
Well, for more on what these developments mean for the ongoing ceasefire talks, our correspondent Joe Inwood sent this update from Jerusalem.
Well, we're currently in stage 1. That is holding, but it's feeling fairly fragile at this point. There are going to be talks taking place. The Israelis are sending a delegation to Qatar. It's there where the mediators are. And they're going to talk about some technical elements. And then the hope is they will move on to talking about stage 2. That will be a permanent end to the fighting and the release of the remaining hostages. But that's much, much more delicate. And all of this is under the shadow of the recent statement by President Trump that he thinks that Gaza should be handed over to the US and turned into a Riviera of the Middle East. And that's making everything uncertain when it was already pretty difficult.
Joe Inwood there in Jerusalem. Joining me live now is Mara Rudman, former Deputy Envoy and Chief of Staff for the Office of the Special Envoy for Middle East Peace in the US State Department. Welcome to you, Mara. Very good to have you with us here on BBC News. I just want to begin with that further round that we saw today of hostage and prisoner releases, the Red Cross raising an alarm about the way that these exchanges are happening, urging all sides to make them private and dignified. There have also been concerns about welfare of people involved on both sides. I'd just like to get your reaction to those images that we've been seeing.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Well, first, it's important that these hostages were released, that the ceasefire is proceeding with however much difficulty. It's also clear there's a lot of posturing going on, I would say, particularly from Hamas. The physical nature of what the hostages look like and how difficult their captivity had been was evident to all. But Hamas also paraded them on a stage. We've seen that in the past. I don't know that we've seen the incidents where they had to read statements, which is what occurred today. So there is a jockeying, a posturing, an effort to portray, I guess, the degree of organization and strength perhaps that Hamas still has. But in fact, I think as the Red Cross notices, concerns pointed out, it does not reflect strength when you behave in that way. It reflects the opposite.
And the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu expressed his shock at how emaciated the released hostages appeared to be. Do you think that could impact, for example, the prospect of those ongoing ceasefire prospects and the need to get the remaining hostages out as quickly as possible?
So I would hope that the appearance of the hostages or the fact that they were treated terribly is not a reason to not push very hard for the release of all the remaining hostages. I think it was fairly clear that by the ways in which Hamas captured them, what happened on October 7th, that the treatment that these hostages have had to endure has been truly horrendous. And so in that sense, we shouldn't be surprised, upsetting as it is, to see the physical evidence of that horrendous treatment. Those who are working towards negotiating the next phase of the ceasefire are deeply committed to getting all of the hostages released. And in fact, it's only by entering and proceeding with the second phase of the ceasefire that all the hostages will come home, that we can start moving towards the type of future that Israelis deserve, and frankly, that also Palestinians who have suffered so much in Gaza and in the West Bank deserve.
I just wonder what you think the real chances are for that phase 2 of the ceasefire. Of course, you would have heard the comments from US President Donald Trump with regards to turning Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East. Prime Minister Netanyahu had also said during his visit in Gaza that Israel reserves the right to go back in at any time. What do you think this means for the prospects of a lasting peace?
Sure, Helena. Well, first, I want to put President Trump's comments aside for now. I'm happy to come back to them. I just think, like a lot that he says, it's noise, and noise that is intended to distract as opposed to solve problems or make the world or the United States better or safer or stronger. So in terms of what Prime Minister Netanyahu is facing, even before this ceasefire agreement began, he had deep political problems at home because he has two very far right, very ideologically driven, extremist, radical, can't have enough adjectives for how far out these two guys are, ministers who have been holding together his coalition, his ability to be prime minister. One of them left the coalition over the decision to go into the first ceasefire, and the other has said that he will leave if the ceasefire progresses to its second phase. And so Prime Minister Netanyahu has yet again, as has been the case throughout this period, an extended period of time for Prime Minister Netanyahu, has a choice to make between his own politics, his own immediate political survival, and what's in the best interest of his country and his people.
And just coming back then to that idea of what Donald Trump had to say, to use your parlance, saying that it is noise, even if that is the case, even if it doesn't come to fruition, do words matter? Do they have an impact on a process, a delicate process like ceasefire negotiations?
Sure. Words matter. I am living here in the United States and seeing the impact of President Trump's words and the actions of his cronies, including Elon Musk, who is in the White House with him, far more than makes sense to any human being. And so it is noise. It is sometimes accompanied by action. In the case, though, of his statements about Gaza, which were very quickly walked back by his White House press secretary, by his national security advisor, by a number of Republicans in the Senate who were willing to actually comment on it. It has, for all sorts of reasons in the United States, almost no chance of becoming reality. The challenge is, and I think this is what you're indicating, it also further inspires those on the Israeli far right who have wanted to ethnically cleanse Gaza for some period of time. It further fosters or supports their aims. And we've seen Prime Minister Netanyahu returning from his White House visit, seemingly on that path, at least for now. So yes, his words are very dangerous.
Okay.
The presidency of the United States is a prime bully pulpit, and we have a bully occupying it.
The view there of Mara Rudman, former Deputy Envoy and Chief of Staff of the Office of the Special Envoy for Middle East Peace in the US State Department. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you.
Now, a US federal judge has blocked Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, also known as DOGE, from accessing the personal financial data of millions of Americans in the Treasury Department records. The district judge issued a preliminary injunction on Saturday ordering Elon Musk and his team to immediately destroy any copies of records. That's after some 19 state attorneys general sued the Trump administration when DOGE was given access to these records last week. There's no immediate comment from the White House or from Elon Musk. The United Nations has warned this week of grave consequences to women's rights if the international community does not step up to eradicate female genital mutilation, or FGM, by 2030. Well, several UN agencies reported that more than 230 million girls and women alive today have undergone FGM, and that they expect this year nearly 4.4 million more girls will be at risk of this harmful practice. So that means every day, up to 12,000 women and girls around the world could suffer from female genital mutilation. It's a tradition that dates back for centuries, although health experts say that there are no actual health benefits to the procedure. Well, joining me live now to discuss from Chicago is Dr. Laurie Post, director at the Buehler Center for Health Policy and Economics at Northwestern University's Institute for Public Health and Medicine. Welcome to you. Thank you for being with us here on the program. FGM has been condemned globally as a violation of human rights, yet millions of girls, as we were just mentioning there, remain at risk. I know that you've worked on this issue firsthand. Just talk to us firstly about the impact that it and the suffering it exposes women and girls to through their lives.
Thank you for having me. So to begin with, when girls undergo female genital mutilation, they oftentimes suffer from sepsis in the immediate aftermath, or exsanguination, and they die immediately. And so if they survive that, then they go on to have urinary tract infections, or infertility and death over the course of their life. And they have trauma, ongoing trauma throughout their whole life.
Now, in many communities, FGM is deeply embedded in cultural or perhaps religious traditions. So how do you go about challenging these norms without alienating the communities themselves?
That's a great question. So I think the first thing we have to do is separate out the difference between cultural norms that are good things like religion, traditions, food, language that bind people together, as opposed to a harmful tradition where people are injured. And just because something was done doesn't mean you should pass it on. And those things need to be ended. And so it's also oftentimes affiliated with religions, when in fact there is no religion that supports FGM. It is counterintuitive to the Bible, to the Quran, and to any religion, any form of religion that exists. Nobody supports it, but oftentimes it's believed to be part of a religion or part of a culture and therefore should be preserved when it should not, and it does not belong to these.
And Dr. Laurie, there are many survivors, of course, perhaps struggling with access to medical care or the kind of support they need, whether that is physiological or psychological. What kind of specialized services do they need? Where are the biggest gaps in care?
So the biggest ones are even, cosmetic surgery just for women so that they can do things like give birth without having horrible outcomes. They need mental health support. And then many of these women are afraid to come forward because they fear repercussions or being stigmatized, or they worry about people from their communities banning them or, seeking consequences for them to come forward.
I'm sure you will have seen, of course, the UN putting out its call once again, saying that it has the goal of ending female genital mutilation by 2030. It's only 5 years away, of course. Do you think enough is being done to make that happen? If not, what urgently needs to be done here?
So, it's about time. There's been advocates, human rights groups have been seeking the end of FGM since the 1960s. It's been criminalized by most governments, condemned by leaders, global leaders. And what that did was it drove it underground and made it harder to vet out. And then also another problem is we think of this as some problem that happens over there, where this is a problem that's happening at home too.
And just talk to us a little bit more about that, perhaps people's perception and how they might not be aware, the communities where it may be happening, for example, potentially in immigrant communities as well, the support that's needed there, the awareness, the understanding.
Right, that is true. So there are countries that have high rates of FGM, and many of those countries have immigrants that come to the United States, to North America, Australia, Western Europe. And in these communities, this practice is still done. It's driven underground to have doctors that are helping to do this. There are also people who cross borders to do it or seek surgeries, return to their home country to have the surgery done. And then these people are afraid to seek help because they are migrants in other countries, or they're worried about stigma or causing problems for people and their families or their communities.
Dr. Laurie Post, thank you so much for being with us to talk about this important issue. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
US President Donald Trump has signed an executive order freezing financial aid to South Africa after threatening to do so earlier this week. Now, President Trump said that he was bringing in the order because of South Africa's new land law, which he says is violating people's rights, and also because of its international court case accusing Israel of genocide. Well, South Africa says that the order lacks factual accuracy and fails to recognize the history of apartheid. South Africa's president has not yet responded to the order, but earlier this week alluded to threats made by the United States in a speech to the nation.
We are witnessing the rise of nationalism, protectionism, the pursuit of narrow interests, and the decline of common cause. We will not be deterred. We are, as South Africans, a resilient people, and we will not be bullied.
Michelle Gavin is the Senior Fellow for Africa Policy Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations, and she explained more about the South African land law.
This Expropriation Act now supersedes the old Expropriation Act that was on the books in South Africa that was from the apartheid era. And land is a very politically contentious issue in South Africa. A lot of the opposition to the ANC elevates this issue in their critique of what the ANC has accomplished since liberation. And essentially, this new law aligns expropriation methods with the Constitution, but it also provides a new section that South Africa has not had before that allows for expropriation without compensation. Now, this is only allowable in very specific circumstances. And I think it will probably be tested in the South African courts because this is a new idea. But I think This is the issue that has so alarmed a number of people. But has any land been expropriated without compensation yet? No.
Well, King Charles and Queen Camilla hosted a black tie dinner last night to celebrate Italian cuisine ahead of their state visit to the country in the spring. High-profile guests, including Dame Helen Mirren, Victoria and David Beckham, and the actor Stanley Tucci, attended the event, which promoted fresh local food and traditional cooking methods. The feast included crab, ravioli and pork, along with English and Italian wine. Well, before we go, we've got some live pictures to bring you from the Superdome in New Orleans, where the kickoff for the Super Bowl is less than 24 hours away. Well, America's most high-profile sporting event will feature the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Kansas City Chiefs, who are looking to make history by winning their third Super Bowl in a row. You're watching BBC News. I'm Helen Humphrey in Washington, D.C. I'll have more global news for you at the top of the hour. Join me then if you can. Bye for now.
Donald Trump has become America's 47th president. Join our team for the latest developments as Donald Trump returns to the White House. See the headlines as they happen with breaking news alerts on the BBC app. And get in-depth coverage on bbc.com. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.
Now on BBC News, the story of a man who charges thousands for a dangerous cosmetic procedure and has left women across the UK disfigured and in agony. Botched, the Brazilian butt lift nightmare.
Hello, Ricky Sawyer. The man you just saw is Ricky Sawyer. He calls himself Britain's biggest Brazilian butt lift injector.
I've done the most non-surgical BBLs in the whole of the UK.
He injects up to a litre of derma filler into people's bums to make them bigger.
I can't believe that procedure did not hurt.
The pain I was in anyway, I would have preferred to have died at that point rather than carry on with the pain.
It was a Sunday morning. Mobile rang, it was Louise. She said, I'm going to die.
That could potentially lead to cardiac arrest, death.
The vibe that I always get is these are silly women driven through vanity and it's their own fault. And that needs to change.
There are hundreds of practitioners carrying this treatment out in the back of salons, in hotel rooms and even in office blocks. But there is one name I have heard more than any other.
We've had 39 complaints about Ricky Sawyer.
It was Ricky Sawyer?
It was Ricky Sawyer.
Let me take you back to the beginning. I'm in a hotel room in East London, preparing to go undercover.
No, you can only see your silhouette. You look good. You think I look like a client?
Yes.
Nice. Absolutely you do.
I've booked into Ricky Sawyer's clinic for a non-surgical Brazilian butt lift, or for short, a liquid BBL. I'm not going to go through with it, but I'm still feeling nervous.
And there's no getting it wrong, because there's no wrong or right. Do you know what I mean? I think sometimes I think it's wrong, and as soon as you think it's wrong, you act differently.
And we're here now.
We're going to do it. Yeah.
I had to message him early this morning to make sure that it was still going ahead and find out the address. And I think my appointment's going to be here. It's not quite what I was expecting. I think I expected a bit of a shiny, flashy clinic like he advertises on Instagram. But let's go in and see.
Hello. How are you? I'm good, thanks. Yourself? Good, thanks. Yeah, how can I help?
Dermatologist?
Doors opening.
Maybe turn it on.
Oh, hold on. Thank you.
Hello, darling. You okay? We don't have space for your friend, but if you just wait in the waiting area, I will take very good care of you and I will run you through everything.
It is. We'll take really good care of you. Yeah, I know. Shocking.
The way that he's coming in, like, hello, darling, what he was like with you.
Yeah, exactly. He sat behind the door, like, hiding when I walked in, but yeah, very charming.
This is one of Ricky Sawyer's recent clients, Joanne. She has always lacked confidence with the way she looks and has spent thousands on treatments. It was last summer she came across a post by a company promising the hourglass figure you've always dreamed of. What made it even more attractive, it was being promoted by celebrities like Katie Price.
So I've now finished the bum. Look at that, I can even feel it jiggling. I love it, I might be able to twerk now. I can't believe that procedure did not hurt. And I've got a bum. Didn't have to fly anywhere.
Come behind, guys, so you know this is not edited. Look at the hip dips. There are no longer any hip dips.
I was excited, and obviously I didn't think it hurt, and I just thought within like an hour now I'm going to have a nice beachy bum.
After paying a £600 deposit, Joanne booked in and set off to Essex.
11 hours to get there, and I had a gut feeling as soon as I arrived, just don't, Joe, just go. Everything felt wrong.
When you say everything felt wrong, what was making you feel that?
Because when I turned up there and I couldn't find the place, and they gave me a postcode, and the postcode led me to this like train station. And then still the directions where they told me to go on the phone were wrong. So once I hung up then, they said press buzzer 4. Then it weren't, it was press buzzer 10, so everything they were saying was wrong. I sat downstairs in the, it was like a little dingy hallway for half hour, really nervous. And there was only a bed in there, a tiny stool and like a worktop. And then I could see behind the door there, and it was a guy, which I found out that was Ricky Sawyer.
Joanne says within minutes of their meeting, Ricky Sawyer began carrying out a liquid BBL. Here he is on Instagram, injecting large amounts of derma filler. Many qualified surgeons see it as one of the most dangerous and painful cosmetic procedures out there. Joanne's pain was instant.
I felt dizzy, sick, like shaky, like my legs didn't work properly, and that was all within a minute of him starting as well. I was starting to sweat because of the pain.
And then at one point you turned around and saw him injecting you. Can you describe what you saw?
Just a sharps box on the floor, his hands with the big needle, and his gloves were full of blood.
Joanne finally made it home, but the pain was growing with every second.
Pain was so intense, and I was just basically living on painkillers.
What was it looking like at this point?
Terrible. You could see all these lumps and bumps and red, and these lumps then would move.
And at this point, did you get back in touch with the Instagram page?
Yeah. But they just kept on telling me, look, everything you're feeling is normal. And I said, well, you told me it'd be pain-free, I'm in agony. They just said, carry on with your painkillers and your antibiotics, and you'll be fine in a couple of days.
But Joanne wasn't fine. She says within days she was delirious and unable to move. Her friend called the ambulance.
Because at this point I was like dripping with sweat, screaming, like I was in childbirth or something, and I just couldn't stick it anymore.
Joanne was blue lighted to hospital and received emergency treatment for sepsis. She says the doctors thought they would need to cut the filler out to save her life.
I would have preferred to have died at that point rather than carry on with the pain.
Joanne was lucky. She responded well to the treatment and didn't need surgery. But she was left with 2 swollen wounds where Ricky Sawyer's cannula had pierced her skin.
It was like a giant gnat bite, and that just burst. It came out like orange jelly first, and then it just started running down my legs like brown and orange, murky, like it was like a horrible thing. But it literally ran out of me for 18 hours. But now I've got like 2 indents in my right bum cheek from where it burst. When I told them I was in hospital with sepsis, they blocked me straight away.
Back at Ricky Sawyer's pop-up clinic in London, the injector boasts about the number of procedures he's carried out.
I've done the most non-surgical BBLs in the whole of the UK, so more than any other practitioner. We do 6-7 a day, 6 days a week. In everywhere. Like, you've come through our smaller page, but we've got a bigger page. I've done that many, I feel like I potentially could do without looking.
If he is working at that rate, which is quite a feat, with each BBL costing around £2,000, he has the potential to turn over £250,000 a month. But his success comes at a cost, as one woman has heard far too often. Ashton Collins is a campaigner for better regulation around cosmetic treatments. She has been collecting evidence about Ricky Sawyer's botched procedures for the last few years.
the most complained about practitioner that we've come across is Ricky Sawyer and his various businesses that he operates. So we've had 39 complaints about Ricky Sawyer that are really severe and serious complications. And I think our next biggest one is about 8 or 9. And, you know, that is a company that has multiple practitioners, so it's not just one person. So yeah, you can get a feel for the scale of, you know, the damage that he's causing.
So we have testimony of 39 women here, and they've all come forward to you saying they have had treatment by Ricky Sawyer and ended up in hospital.
Yep.
And if we just look at it, we can see buttocks were painful and swollen. I'm struggling to walk and cannot work. Pus started oozing, shark stabbing pain, and the ambulance had to be called as I couldn't breathe. Needed urgent surgical intervention.
Yeah.
This is really serious.
Yeah, it doesn't get much more serious than that. And I think, you know, what makes it even more shocking is that none of these people thought they were embarking upon something that was as serious as this. They thought these treatments were risk-free beauty treatments, and even when they reach out for help, they are dismissed, their symptoms are dismissed as being normal, and it escalates to the point where once they get to hospital, it's touch and go. It's horrible.
These pictures show one woman's injuries after having a liquid BBL. She ended up in hospital with sepsis. Back in my appointment, the topic of infection comes up.
People that are unlucky with it, usually they're not unlucky and they were actually just not very cooperative with the aftercare. Like, a lot of people are like, we've had some people, even other practitioners come in, and I had some lady and she was like, she's like, oh, antibiotics. And I was like, yeah, like, you've got to take them, etc. She was like, can I start them tomorrow? So I'm going to go for a drink today. Like, no, if you can't commit to looking after the treatment, then just don't have it yet.
If I get it, take the antibiotics.
The chance of you suffering an infection if you follow the aftercare and take antibiotics is literally like 0.34% statistically. Very small.
Ricky Sawyer seemed adamant there was no real risk as long as I took antibiotics and followed the aftercare instructions. This went against everything I had heard from Joanne and many of the other women I've spoken to. I travelled to Wolverhampton to meet Mr. Dalvi Hamzar, a plastic surgeon who sits on the Joint Council of Cosmetic Practitioners. I wanted to get his take on my appointment.
The biggest risk is infection, and we've worked really hard to prevent with antibiotics and following the aftercare. People that are
antibiotics that prevent the infection, it's a treatment.
And they were actually just cooperative with the aftercare.
In my appointment, Ricky Sawyer gave me a box of antibiotics without a valid prescription. This is illegal.
If during the treatment you haven't reacted poorly to the lidocaine but you are struggling with the discomfort, at your request we can administer a small amount more.
Dalvi tells me increasing the dosage of lidocaine, a local anaesthetic, is a medical decision that Ricky Sawyer is not legally allowed to make.
I gather this is not a medical practitioner, so they can't make independent decisions as to how much lidocaine to give. And to say, oh, at your request we'll give you more, just giving it glibly is not an answer, and not knowing what the safe limit to give you by not having your weight taken so that you can work out how much lidocaine to give you.
Ricky Sawyer also advertised that there would be an ultrasound doctor at my appointment. Dalvi says using an ultrasound machine is vital.
Particularly with a filler, we always use that as a quick scan just to make sure I know what the pertinent anatomy is for that particular patient, because everyone's anatomy is different. So to avoid any problems, this has been almost a lifesaver for me. This has been the one bit of equipment that you use constantly in the clinic.
With the ultrasound, it's more for like checking any issues and also helping with people's nerves. But actually the use of it other than that, because as I was saying to your friend that, nobody's ever, so that would be really good at preventing, in high risk areas, preventing you from administering into a vessel or an artery. It's never happened.
I'd been in that room for 40-45 minutes and Ricky Sawyer wanted to inject me with 1,000 millilitres.
1,000 mils in one go is going to put your body tissues at risk under the pressure of that volume That's going to stretch your tissues.
If I had gone through with it, what could have happened to me?
You would have been in intense pain. We know that infection risk is high, so you could be there. And also with that large volume, even, let's just say, even if you could get the product in the right place, that pressure would cause that product to move. It moves, it dissects through the tissues and then could go into an area where it is quite dangerous. That will cause you major problems.
What would be the worst thing that could happen to me?
You could die.
It was a Sunday morning. Mobile rang, it was Louise. So she said, well, I sent you a text to say, I'm in hospital, but it's okay, I'm going to be fine. I said, okay, right, that's good. So she said, but I'm not. She said, I'm going to die.
Janet Taylor's daughter had gone for a liquid BBL. She was excited. But a week later, she needed emergency surgery in hospital.
I went into immediate shock. They were tracking her sepsis and it was travelling down her leg. And it was travelling at such a rate and her blood pressure was dropping, temperature was rising, but they didn't know whether or not they'd had to amputate a leg or take a bum muscle out to stop the sepsis travelling any further. So it would have meant she could have either lost a leg or ended up in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. She said, it's not worth living, I'd rather die. I said, can I speak to the surgeon? So I said, how much time have we got? He said, 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, there's no going back, Louise will die. You could hear all the mechanics in the background and things being done, and she hung up.
Janet drove straight to the hospital. She sat on a cold hospital floor for 4 hours while her daughter fought for her life.
There wasn't one thought going through my head. I didn't touch my phone, didn't speak to anybody. I didn't want to think any further than just being sat on a floor. It was too painful.
What was it like seeing her the first time after the surgery?
I was just so happy that she was alive. Sorry. Yeah, I was just so happy that she was alive and talking.
And then what were the next few days like?
Louise was on morphine, gas and air, and she was shaking with the pain because they had to keep packing this wound so the flesh grows upwards. But the pain she was on, she was shaking, and she asked me to be there all the time outside, and I had to hold her down when they had to do anything to her, so putting any cannulas in, any drips in. She had most of them in her neck, so I had to hold her down and keep her still while they did all that to her. On one occasion when Louise was in critical care, she was screaming and she just said, Mum, please don't let this happen to anyone else.
It's been 15 months since Louise was taken into hospital. Although she survived, Janet says her daughter has lost her spark for life. Louise is waiting for corrective surgery and feels too insecure to appear on camera, but wanted her mum to speak to us on her behalf. Janet is determined to get justice for Louise and is trying to get the police to investigate. I decided to go along with her on a journey she's made many times before to the local police station.
Been into Bolton 5 times in total. First time I went in, it was difficult to explain the procedure that Louise had had because it wasn't well known. The person working on reception asked if Louise had signed a consent form, of which I answered yes. So he actually said it was her own fault. On my 3rd visit, I still hadn't had any contact, so I decided to go to the police station again. I was determined not to leave on this occasion until I spoke to a sergeant. I went into reception, the same gentleman was on reception, and he told me that the sergeant was too busy to come and see me. So I said that I would wait and I wouldn't leave the interview room until the sergeant came down. The gentleman then called 2 police officers and had me removed from the station. I was very confused that I was reporting a crime that I think is extremely serious, and I was being escorted out of the premises by 2 officers for wanting to speak to a sergeant.
Not everyone has a Janet that's able to fight their corner. So many of the women I've spoken to feel unable to go to the police. They feel ashamed, they feel scared, they just don't feel able to report it. They're left trying to rebuilding their lives but unable to get any form of justice. Janet isn't the only one who is trying to take action against Ricky Sawyer. 3 councils have put out prohibition notices banning him from carrying out liquid BBLs. Glasgow City Council, Epping Forest District Council and Brentwood Council say they've done so to protect the public from serious injury. It's the only tool they have to try and bring an unregulated industry under control.
Aesthetics clinics can pop up anywhere, and they could close down in one area of the city and open up in another, and we wouldn't know about it. It's very difficult to deal with it. It's very difficult to gather the intelligence correctly to know where these practitioners are happening and our hands are tied. I would say it's very urgent to come up with a solution to the problem that is non-surgical cosmetics. There needs to be a standard put across the board so that everybody knows what should be done.
The pressure on the government to act is growing. Last year, a mother of 5, Alice Webb, died after having a liquid BBL by a different practitioner. A petition launched in her name has received over 20,000 signatures. It's calling for liquid BBLs to be banned unless they're carried out by a qualified plastic surgeon in a safe clinical environment. We put our evidence to the Department of Health and Social Care, which said they are urgently looking for options for tougher regulation. They said our findings were shocking and that those caught dispensing medication without a licence should feel the full force of the law. This is exactly what Janet has tried to make happen in Bolton Police Station.
Hiya. Hi.
So how did it go?
I thought it went really well.
Yeah?
I'm surprised. I've been told that Bolton have definitely sent it to Essex.
So once Essex do take it on, or if they do take it on, then you could be looking at a criminal case?
Yes, definitely.
It sounds like you have hope.
I do have hope. I feel during all this time I've been in limbo land and I just want it to end. And this will give me and Louise closure on the whole situation, that justice will be done.
Janet has made some progress, but what happens next is far from certain. A week later, I approached Essex and Greater Manchester police forces to get an update. Both said they have looked at the case and it's down to the other to investigate. It appears Janet is back in limbo. I've come to see Joanne in her hometown of Port Talbot in South Wales. She is still processing what happened to her 6 months ago. When I met Joanne, the first thing she said was that she lacked confidence, and this is why she chose to get a liquid BBL. Her priority now is to make sure her daughter never feels the same way.
How do you feel about the fact that Ricky is still in business?
It's shocking. He should be locked up. Yeah, I can't believe he's still doing all these treatments and nearly killing people.
And Maya, I don't know how much you know about what your mum's been through, but would you ever get any of these treatments?
No, never.
Why not?
I think everyone should just stay the way they are.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I love their way of thinking. I wish I had more common sense.
Joanne is determined to protect her young daughter. But for Janet, it's too late for that. Her priority is stopping the man who she says almost killed her daughter. But so far, without success.
It just makes me feel sick. I'm more determined now. More determined than ever to stop him.
If Ricky Sawyer was here now, what would you say to him?
I would ask Ricky Sawyer if he was comfortable with me injecting him. Not having any medical training, not having a clean, safe environment in my front room, injecting him with the same products that he's injected Louise with.
I'm back at Ricky Sawyer's pop-up clinic in East London, but I'm not undercover. I want to hear what he has to say.
Hello, Ricky Sawyer.
Oh. My name is Shona Elliott. I'm a journalist at the BBC. Ricky Sawyer, can I please ask, are you breaking the law?
Could you please leave?
You gave me medication without prescription. Are you putting your clients in danger? Ricky Sawyer, please ask. Are you putting your clients in danger? 4 women have told us they have nearly died
After treatment by you, why are you still carrying out these BBLs? Get me out. Do you have anything else to say? No. Do you have anything to say to the woman? Okay, out. It's been 2 weeks since I last saw Ricky Sawyer. He's not responded and he's blocked me on social media. But by the looks of things, he's still in business. He's put up dozens of posts on social media advertising his liquid BBL treatment. And it's £300 off this week.